What if I told you that the people who truly matter will stay close even when a mile stretch between you, and that distance, rather than being a thief of connection, is actually a revealer of what was always there beneath the surface? There are people who move through life believing that proximity equals intimacy, that being near someone physically means the bond is strong, that frequency of contact is the same as depth of care. And then something happens. A job takes you to another city. A relationship shifts into long distance. A friend moves across the country. A family member relocates. And suddenly, in that space that opens up, in that gap where daily routine used to fill the silence, you begin to see something you could not see before. You begin to see who reaches across the distance and who simply lets the thread go slack. You begin to see who was holding on because it was easy and who was holding on because it mattered. This is not a comfortable realization. It is not the kind of insight that arrives with fanfare or celebration. It comes quietly, often in the middle of an ordinary afternoon when you notice that the person who used to text you every day has not reached out in weeks. It comes when you realize that the effort you are making to maintain the connection is not being met, not being mirrored, not being reciprocated. It comes when you understand, with a kind of sad clarity, that what you thought was mutual care was actually just convenience. And this hurts. It hurts because it forces you to revise the story you told yourself about who loved you, who valued you, who saw you as essential rather than optional. Carl Jung spoke often about the persona, that social mask we wear to navigate the world, to fit into roles and expectations, to be acceptable to others. And he understood that much of what we call relationship is actually a dance of personas, a choreography of surfaces. We meet each other at the level of roles: colleague, neighbor, friend, family member, and we perform those roles with varying degrees of sincerity. But the persona is not the self. The persona is what we show. The self is what we are. And distance has a way of stripping the persona away, of making the performance too costly to maintain. When someone is right there in front of you, it is easy to smile, to nod, to engage in small talk, to maintain the appearance of closeness. But when distance enters, when the ease of proximity is removed, the question becomes, what remains? What is left when convenience is no longer a factor? What is left when maintaining the connection requires intention, effort, deliberate choice? You may have experienced this yourself. You may have moved away from a place you thought was home, from people you thought were your people, and felt the silence that followed. At first, you told yourself it was just the adjustment period. Everyone is busy. Everyone needs time. But weeks became months, and the silence deepened, and you realized that the connections you thought were strong were actually just situational. They existed because you were there. They existed because it was easy. And when it stopped being easy, they stopped existing. This is not to say that those people were malicious or cruel. Most of the time, they were not. Most of the time, they simply did not care enough to make the effort. And that is the truth that distance reveals. Not that people hate you, but that they do not prioritize you. Not that they wish you harm, but that they do not think of you often enough to reach out. Not that the bond was fake, but that it was shallow. There's a kind of grief in this. A quiet, unglamorous grief that does not announce itself loudly. It is the grief of realizing that you were more invested than they were. That you thought the friendship was deep when it was actually casual. That you believed the love was unconditional when it was actually contingent on proximity, on ease, on not requiring too much. And this grief is compounded by the fact that it is often invisible to others. People do not gather around you to mourn the loss of a friendship that faded. There is no ritual for the ending of something that was never officially named. You are left to process it alone in the privacy of your own heart, wondering if you were wrong to expect more, wondering if you were naive to believe that distance would not matter. But here is where the deeper truth begins to emerge. Here is where the pain starts to transform into something else, something closer to clarity. Because distance does not create the lack of care. Distance reveals it. The person who stops calling when you move away was not deeply connected to you before. They were just there. The friend who cannot be bothered to send a message, who always has an excuse, who makes you feel like you are asking for too much when you simply want to stay in touch. That friend was never as committed as you were. The family member who only reaches out when they need something, who disappears when you need them, who treats your presence as optional. That person was always operating from a place of convenience rather than genuine bond. Distance did not break these connections. Distance simply made visible what was already true. Jung also spoke about individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who you truly are, of separating from the collective expectations and discovering your own inner authority. And part of that process is learning to see clearly, not cynically, not bitterly, but clearly. It is learning to distinguish between what is real and what is performance, between what is mutual and what is one-sided, between who loves you for who you are and who tolerates you because you fit a role in their life. Distance is one of the great teachers of this discernment. It forces you to see who crosses the gap and who does not, who makes the effort and who expects you to do all the work, who values the connection enough to maintain it even when it is not convenient, and who lets it slip away without a second thought. And this is painful, yes, but it is also liberating. Because once you see clearly, you stop investing in connections that do not nourish you. You stop pouring energy into relationships that are not reciprocal. You stop making excuses for people who show you, again and again, that you are not a priority. And in that stopping, in that withdrawal of energy from what does not serve you, you create space. Space for the people who do reach out. Space for the relationships that do survive the distance. Space for the connections that are rooted in something deeper than convenience. There are people who will stay close to you, no matter how far away you are. These are the people who text you out of the blue, just check in, who remember the small details of your life, who ask how you are and actually wait for the answer, who make time for a phone call even when their schedule is full, who send you things that remind them of you, who celebrate your successes and mourn your losses from across the miles. These are the people whose care is not dependent on proximity. These are the people whose love is not contingent on ease. These are the people who have chosen you, not because you are convenient, but because you matter. And when you find these people, when you recognize them, you begin to understand that quality is more important than quantity. That a few deep connections are worth more than 100 shallow ones. That it is better to have 2 friends who truly see you than 20 acquaintances who barely know you. That the size of your social circle is not a measure of your worth. That being alone is not the same as being unloved. That solitude, when it is chosen or accepted with grace, can be a place of profound richness rather than deprivation. You may have grown up believing that being popular, being surrounded by people, being constantly busy with social engagements was the goal. You may have internalized a message that if you are alone, something is wrong with you. That if you are not constantly connected, constantly available, constantly in the mix, you are failing at life. But this is a shallow measure. This is the logic of the persona, not the self. The persona seeks validation through numbers, through visibility, through the appearance of being loved. The self seeks truth. The self seeks depth. The self would rather have one real connection than 1,000 fake ones. Jung understood that the inner life is where the real work happens. That the journey toward wholeness is not about accumulating external validation, but about integrating the disparate parts of yourself, about facing your shadow, about becoming conscious of what drives you, about choosing authenticity over acceptance. And part of that journey is learning to let go of the people who were never truly with you. Not with bitterness, not with resentment, but with a kind of sad, clear-eyed acceptance. They were part of your story for a season. They served a purpose. They reflected something back to you. even if that reflection was painful. And now they are gone, or distant, or faded, and that is okay. That is how life works. Not everyone is meant to walk the whole path with you. Distance exposes true intentions because it removes the buffer of habit. When you see someone every day, it is easy to maintain the relationship without much thought. You fall into patterns. You have routines. You do not have to choose to connect because connection happens automatically. But when distance enters, when you no longer run into each other at work or at the gym or at the coffee shop, the connection has to become intentional. You have to choose it. You have to make the effort. You have to reach out. And in that requirement of choice, the truth becomes clear. Some people will choose you. Some people will not. And both of those outcomes are information. Both of those outcomes tell you something important. The people who do not choose you are not necessarily bad people. They're just not your people. They are not wired for the kind of depth or commitment or effort that long-distance connection requires. They are not willing or able to prioritize you in that way. And that is their choice. You cannot force someone to care. You cannot convince someone to make you a priority. You cannot argue someone into valuing you. All you can do is notice. All you can do is see clearly. All you can do is decide, based on that clarity, where you will invest your own energy. And this is where the shift happens. This is where the pain of being let go transforms into the power of letting go. Because once you stop chasing people who do not choose you, once you stop trying to convince people to care, once you stop making excuses for people who show you through their actions that you are not important to them, you reclaim your energy. You reclaim your time. You reclaim your emotional bandwidth. And you can redirect all of that toward the people who do show up, toward the people who do reach out, toward the people who do make the effort, toward yourself. There is a particular kind of person who feels this dynamic more acutely than others. These are the people who love deeply, who invest fully, who give generously, who assume that others operate with the same level of care and commitment that they do. These are the people who are often surprised, often hurt, often bewildered when they realize that not everyone loves the way they love, that not everyone prioritizes relationships the way they do, that not everyone feels the weight of connection the way they do. If you're this kind of person, you have probably been called too sensitive, too intense, too much. You have probably been told to lower your expectations, to not care so much, to be more casual, more detached, more easygoing. But here's the truth. You're not too much. You are just too much for people who do not have the capacity to meet you. You're not too sensitive. You are just sensitive in a world that often rewards numbness. You're not too intense. You are just intense in a culture that prefers surfaces. And the pain you feel when people do not reciprocate your care, when they do not match your effort, when they let the connection fade, that pain is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that you are awake. It is a sign that you are feeling. It is a sign that you are human. Jung wrote about the process of withdrawing projections, of learning to see people as they are rather than as we wish them to be. And this is part of what distance teaches. It teaches you to stop projecting your own values onto others, to stop assuming that because you would cross the distance, they will too, to stop believing that because you care deeply, they do as well. Distance forces you to see people's actual behavior rather than their stated intentions. It forces you to trust actions over words. It forces you to accept that some people will disappoint you, not because they are evil, but because they are human and limited and operating from their own wounds and fears and priorities. And this acceptance, this clear-eyed seeing, is not the same as cynicism. Cynicism is a defense mechanism. Cynicism says, no one can be trusted. Everyone will let you down. Connection is pointless. But what we're talking about here is not cynicism. It is discernment. Discernment says, some people can be trusted. Some people will show up. Some connections are worth the effort, and I will invest my energy accordingly. Discernment does not close the heart. It protects the heart so that it can remain open to what is real. You may have noticed that the people who stay close across distance are often the people who themselves understand depth, who themselves value authenticity, who themselves have done the inner work of becoming conscious. These are the people who do not need constant external stimulation to feel connected. These are the people who can hold you in their heart, even when you are not physically present. These are the people who understand that love is not a feeling that comes and goes based on convenience, but a commitment, a choice, a practice. These are the people who know that true intimacy is not about frequency of contact, but about quality of presence. And when you find these people, you realize that distance is not an obstacle. It is a filter. It filters out the shallow and reveals the deep. It filters out the conditional and reveals the unconditional. It filters out the convenient and reveals the committed. And yes, the filtering process is painful. Yes, it means losing people you thought would be in your life forever. Yes, it means facing the loneliness of being seen by fewer people. But it also means that the people who remain, the people who cross the distance, the people who choose you again and again, those people are real. Those connections are solid. Those bonds can be trusted. There is a particular loneliness that comes with being someone who values depth in a world that often prioritizes breadth. You may feel out of step with the culture around you, with its emphasis on networking, on accumulating contacts, on maintaining a large social media presence, on being seen and liked and followed. You may feel exhausted by the demand to be constantly available, constantly responsive, constantly engaged. You may feel like you are failing because you do not have hundreds of friends, because you do not enjoy large parties, because you prefer one-on-one conversations to group dynamics, because you need time alone to recharge, because you cannot maintain superficial connections without feeling drained. But this is not failure. This is a different way of being. This is the way of the introvert, in Jung's terms. Not introversion as shyness or social anxiety, but introversion as an orientation toward the inner world, as a way of processing experience internally, as a need to withdraw from external stimulation in order to make sense of things, in order to integrate, in order to stay connected to yourself. And for people with this orientation, distance can actually be easier to navigate than proximity, because distance allows for the kind of intentional, meaningful contact that nourishes rather than depletes. A long phone call every few weeks can feel more intimate than daily small talk. A heartfelt letter can feel more connecting than a dozen casual texts. Quality over quantity is not just a preference, it is a necessity. And yet, even for introverts, even for people who are comfortable with solitude, the realization that someone has let the connection fade can be painful. Because it's not about needing constant contact. It is about wanting to be chosen. It is about wanting to matter. It is about wanting to know that you are held in someone's awareness, that you are valued, that your absence is noticed. And when distance reveals that you are not chosen, that you do not matter in the way you thought you did, that your absence is not noticed, the pain is real. It is the pain of realizing that you are more alone than you knew, that the connection you relied on was more fragile than you understood, that the person you thought saw you is actually just going through the motions. But again, this pain is also information. It is also clarity. It is also a gift, even though it does not feel like one at the time, because it allows you to stop investing in illusions. It allows you to stop pretending that a connection is deep when it is shallow. It allows you to stop making excuses for people who do not prioritize you. It allows you to redirect your energy toward what is real, what is mutual, what is nourishing. And in that redirection, you begin to build a life that is more aligned with your true self, more congruent with your actual values, more honest about what you need and who you are. Jung spoke about the shadow, the parts of ourselves that we reject or deny or hide because they do not fit the persona we want to present. And one of the shadow elements that many people carry is the fear of being unlovable, the fear of being too much or not enough, the fear of being abandoned or rejected. Distance can trigger this shadow material. When someone does not reach out, the shadow whispers, "See, you're not worth the effort." When someone lets the connection fade, the shadow says, "You are forgettable." When someone prioritizes other people over you, the shadow insists, "You are not important." And if you are not conscious of this dynamic, you can spiral into shame, into self-blame, into the belief that the problem is you. But the problem is not you. The problem is that you are expecting depth from people who are not capable of it. The problem is that you are projecting your own values onto people who do not share them. The problem is that you're trying to force a connection that is not mutual. And the solution is not to change yourself, to become less caring, less invested, less deep. The solution is to become more discerning, to see more clearly, to accept what is rather than clinging to what you wish were true. This is part of the individuation process, learning to stand in your own truth, even when it is lonely, learning to value your own inner experience, even when it is not validated by others, learning to trust your own perceptions, even when they are at odds with what you have been taught to believe, learning to let go of people who do not serve your growth, who do not honor your depth, who do not meet you with the same level of care that you offer. This is not easy. It goes against the grain of a culture that tells you to be accommodating, to be flexible, to not rock the boat, to keep the peace, to maintain relationships at all costs. But some costs are too high. Some relationships are too draining. Some connections are too one-sided. And it is okay to walk away. It is okay to let go. It is okay to say, "This does not work for me anymore." It is okay to prioritize your own well-being over someone else's comfort. It is okay to choose solitude over shallow connection. It is okay to be alone rather than surrounded by people who do not truly see you. And here is the paradox. When you stop chasing people who do not choose you, when you stop trying to force connections that are not mutual, when you stop settling for less than you deserve, you create space for something new. You create space for people who do value depth. You create space for connections that are reciprocal. You create space for relationships that nourish rather than deplete. You create space for yourself, for your own inner life, for your own growth and healing and becoming. And in that space, you begin to discover that you are not as alone as you thought, that there are others who move through the world the way you do, who value what you value, who understand what you understand. They are rare, yes, but they are real. Distance, then, becomes not a tragedy, but a tool for discernment, a tool for clarity, a tool for separating what is real from what is illusion. And the people who survive the distance, who reach across the gap, who choose you again and again, those people become your true community. Not a community based on proximity or convenience or habit, but a community based on mutual care, on shared values, on genuine connection. And this kind of community, even if it is small, even if it is scattered across cities or countries, even if it exists primarily through phone calls and letters and occasional visits, this kind of community is more sustaining than 100 surface-level friendships. You may be reading this and feeling the ache of recognizing yourself in these words. You may be thinking of the people who have let you go, the friendships that have faded, the connections that did not survive the distance. You may be feeling the loneliness of being someone who loves deeply in a world that often loves casually. You may be wondering if there is something wrong with you, if you're asking for too much, if you should lower your standards, if you should be more forgiving, more understanding, more willing to accept breadcrumbs. But there is nothing wrong with you. You're not asking for too much. You're asking for what is reasonable, what is mutual, what is healthy. You are asking to be met with the same level of care that you offer. You are asking to be chosen, not just tolerated. You are asking to be valued, not just convenient. And these are not unreasonable requests. These are the foundation of any real relationship. And if someone cannot meet you there, if someone cannot offer you that basic level of reciprocity, then they are not your person. And that is okay. That is not a reflection on you. That is just reality. Jung believed that the goal of life is not to be happy in the shallow sense, not to be comfortable or popular or externally successful, but to become whole, to integrate the conscious and the unconscious, to face the shadow, to individuate, to become who you truly are beneath all the layers of conditioning and expectation and performance. And part of that process is learning to be alone. Not lonely, but alone. Alone in the sense of being self-sufficient, of not needing external validation to know your own worth, of being able to sit with yourself without distraction, of finding richness in your own inner world. This does not mean you do not need others. Humans are relational beings. We are wired for connection. But there is a difference between needing others because you cannot bear to be alone and wanting others because connection enriches your life. There is a difference between clinging to relationships out of fear and choosing relationships out of love. There is a difference between being desperate for approval and being open to genuine intimacy. And distance helps you clarify this difference. It helps you see whether you're holding on to someone because the connection is real or because you are afraid of being alone. And if you discover that you are afraid of being alone, that is also information. That is also an invitation to turn inward, to explore that fear, to ask where it comes from, to heal the wound that makes aloneness feel like death. Because aloneness is not death. Aloneness is just aloneness. It is neutral. It can be rich or empty depending on what you bring to it. If you bring fear and shame and the belief that being alone means you are unlovable, then aloneness will be painful. But if you bring curiosity and self-compassion and the willingness to meet yourself, then aloneness can be generative. It can be a place of creativity, of reflection, of deep rest, of becoming. There are people who have learned to inhabit their aloneness with grace, who have learned to be their own good company, who have learned that solitude is not a punishment, but a gift, who have learned that the inner world is vast and endlessly interesting, who have learned that they do not need constant external stimulation to feel alive. These are the people who are not devastated when distance reveals that a connection was shallow. They are disappointed, yes. They grieve, yes. But they do not collapse. They do not lose themselves, because they have themselves. They have their inner anchor. They have their own depth. And this is what Jung meant by individuation. Not becoming isolated or self-absorbed or disconnected from others, but becoming rooted in your own being, so that your connections with others come from a place of fullness rather than emptiness, from choice rather than need, from love rather than fear. And when you are rooted in your own being, distance does not threaten you. It clarifies, it reveals, it teaches, it shows you who is real and who is not. It shows you where to invest your energy and where to let go. It shows you that you are capable of surviving the loss of people who are never truly with you. It shows you that you're stronger than you knew. So if you are in a season of distance, if you have moved away or been moved away from, if you're watching connections fade and wondering what it means, let me offer you this. It means you are being given the opportunity to see clearly, to see who values you and who does not, to see where your energy has been going and whether it has been reciprocated, to see what is real and what is illusion. And this seeing, though painful, is also a form of liberation. Because once you see, you can choose. You can choose to stop investing in what does not serve you. You can choose to honor your own depth. You can choose to wait for the people who will meet you there. You can choose to be alone rather than settling for less than you deserve. And in that choosing, you begin to build a life that is true. A life that is aligned with who you actually are rather than who you think you should be. A life that honors your need for depth, for authenticity, for real connection. A life that does not apologize for being different, for being intense, for being too much for people who are not capable of meeting you. A life that recognizes that distance is not the enemy. Distance is the revealer. Distance is the teacher. Distance is the filter that separates the shallow from the deep, the convenient from the committed, the conditional from the unconditional. And the people who survive that filter, who cross that distance, who choose you again and again, those people are your people. Hold them close. Honor them. Cherish them. Not because they are perfect, but because they are real. Because they see you and choose you anyway. Because they understand that love is not about proximity, but about presence. Because they know that true connection does not require daily contact, but does require consistent care. Because they have shown you, through their actions, that you matter, that you are worth the effort, that you are not forgotten. And if you have not yet found those people, if you are still in the wilderness of distance and loss and fading connections, know this: you are not broken. You are not unlovable. You're not too much. You are just waiting for the people who can meet you where you are. And they are out there. They are rare, yes, but they are real. And in the meantime, you have yourself. You have your own depth. You have your own inner world. You have your own capacity for reflection and growth and becoming. And that is not nothing. That is everything. Distance exposes true intentions. It shows you who is with you and who is not. It shows you where you have been fooling yourself and where you have been seeing clearly. It shows you what is real and what is performance. And though this exposure is painful, it is also necessary. Because you cannot build a true life on false foundations. You cannot build deep connections with people who are only capable of shallow ones. You cannot force someone to care. All you can do is see clearly, choose wisely, and trust that the people who are meant to walk with you will find their way to you, or stay with you, or return to you, no matter the distance. And you will know them by their actions, by their consistency, by their willingness to reach across the gap, by their refusal to let convenience dictate care, by their understanding that love is a practice, not a feeling, by their commitment to showing up, even when it is hard, even when it is not easy, even when there is distance between you. These are the people who matter. These are the connections worth keeping. These are the relationships that will sustain you through all the seasons of your life. So let distance do its work. Let reveal. Let teach. Let clarify. And trust that what remains after the filtering is what is real. Trust that you are capable of surviving the loss of what was never truly there. Trust that your depth is not a problem, but a gift. Trust that the right people will see that gift and honor it. Trust that you are not alone, even when you are alone. Trust that your inner world is rich enough to sustain you. Trust that you are enough exactly as you are, and that the people who are meant to find you will find you, and that distance will not keep them away. It will only make the connection more precious, more intentional, more real.